I'm Addison Brazil. Grief Club, the podcast starts now. Welcome back to another episode of Grief Club, the podcast, where I take the parts of my book, First Year of Grief Club, A Gift from a Friend Who Gets It, and use them as launching points for deeper conversations with special guests and friends. And today we have the perfect mix of both. Welcome to the show, Justin Michael Williams.
Hey, hey, hey. So great to be here. Thank you for having me, Addison.
Yes, we are. I have been looking forward to this for so long. And officially, I will introduce you as the Grammy-nominated musician and award-winning author and speaker, but also personally introduce you as a very dear and near member of my own personal grief club and close friend. So we are so happy to have you here today. In Grief Club tradition, we're going to start just by checking in. So if you want to take a deep breath with me. And in one word, how are you feeling physically right now?
Tense.
I'm going to say squirrelish. Never said that word before in my life. In one word, how are you feeling emotionally right now?
Energized.
Excited. And in one word, how are you feeling mentally right now?
Present.
Say connected. Which is thanks to you. Now that we're checked in, I can say I was just listening to your most recent episode of The Kingdom, and I wasn't feeling connected 28 minutes ago, but after listening to the beginning of that episode and then doing that little embodied exercise, I got to hop on here feeling pre-connected to you. So thank you for that. And a plug, which we'll do more of for sure, for the great show that you have over there as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Course. So the first thing that I like to do is just have you honor your journey openly. Just take a few minutes to tell us about you and how you got to show up in the world the way you do today, which is amazingly.
It's been a journey. And I think, the way that I'll sum it up is, I feel like my journey is something that when I talk to people about it, parallels many people, probably those listening to your podcast. And it's the journey of feeling like I had to accomplish and achieve my way to happiness, and then realizing that that wasn't the way, and then making a pivot. And I think we all have these moments in our lives, so for me, the journey to like wellness and well-being, I just feel so lucky. It started early. I was 18 and got to UCLA to go to college. I grew up in a really, really rough neighborhood and environment in Northern California outside of Oakland. When people ask, like, what kind of neighborhood did you grow up in? I said, well, I grew up next to the street that the police didn't even like to drive down. And so I had gunshot holes literally on the outside of the house that I grew up in. And like my adaptation to growing up with that trauma was to be the overachiever kid. Like, as long as I did enough, accomplished enough, achieved enough, then I would finally be happy. I'd finally be enough. I'd get out of here. I'd make money for my family, all those things, And I did. Like, I actually did that. I overachieved my ass off as a kid. I got to UCLA. And when I was 18, I'm 35 now. So when I was 18, I get to LA thinking, oh, I'm going to be happy now. And immediately was so confused because I realized I was still totally miserable. And I couldn't figure it out. It was so alarming to me that how could it be that I went from this environment with gun violence and with no money and being in the closet and all of this to living in a ritzy, beautiful neighborhood in Westwood in LA, for anybody who knows, with extra money and scholarships and out of the closet. How could I still be miserable? And I went to a therapist, and that therapist said to me something that I think will resonate for most of us. He said, it looks like you've spent your whole life trying to find your happiness outside of yourself, and it's about time that you look within. So contextually, right? Like, this is before the iPhone came out, right? So the reason I'm making that frame is even though this phrase is very, 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 very common now, like happiness within, like I had never even heard that concept before. Like no one had ever even proposed that idea to me in the hood, find your happiness within. And so I'm like, within what? Like, that's what I said to him. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, oh, young man, and this is a true story. He said, I want you to go to the personal growth, what was called the self-help, section at Borders bookstore, if anybody remembers that.
Mm-hmm.
And just pick up a book and see what happens. And then I also want you to try meditating. And I had never even heard of meditation. Didn't know what it was, nothing. And so being, the overachiever that I was, I go to the self-help section and I pick up a book and I start learning how to meditate. And I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Which is really funny for me to say now as a person who just, has a big book on meditation. But anyway, the reason I'm sharing this story is because I think for so many of us, we have learned, and we have to learn again and again. We've learned that our happiness gets tied to some external source, a relationship, a job, a certain amount of money, a certain place that you're living, a certain group of friends, a certain whatever. And this is why I love that we talk about grief, because then when one of those things or any of those things get taken away, if we're not centered in a different place, then we don't just experience grief, we completely lose who we are if we think we are tied to any of those things. And so, my journey to meditation and mindfulness and personal growth started then. And I kept at it. And by the time I was 21, I was already doing like big motivational speaking talks about being a young Black gay man, and mental health and weaving in music. And now 15 years later, which is crazy to say, it's, opened up into just this big, beautiful journey that's allowed me to, work with hundreds of thousands of people in 40 countries around the world and put out a book and a Grammy nominated, album. And I still pinch myself to say that my pain could have led me to this incredible life. And I know that's what's possible for all of us when we lean into it.
Absolutely. And I love what you just hit on there because I don't think it's really come up on the show, but it's so prevalent of, one thing we can really grieve that we overlook a lot of the time is the loss of identity. And
Yeah.
then the loss of the created identity that we created to deal with grief when that doesn't work anymore, and sort of all of those attachments around that. And I know we're both nodding ferociously because we've been in those cycles, with access to all of this extra love and healing and mindful work and stuff that you start to shed, but there is grief attached to every level of that, and you can miss a part of you that didn't serve you anymore. There's so much grief wrapped up sort of in the identity piece of dealing with grief.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that I always talk about as it relates to transformation. So, the work that I love doing in the world is around transforming things. And what I always say is transformation actually requires grief. And this is why we avoid it. This is why we focus on external change. Because when we change something, oh, let me just change this, it looks different for a second. And it makes it easy for us to handle and do it. And it feels like we're growing or changing, but then we soon realize we're in the same damn place again and again and again, just looking slightly different in a different relationship in a different city, but the same stuff. Right. And so the reason why I share that is because transformation is so much deeper than change. Transformation is an inside job. And what it requires, and this is what I'm really getting to here, is it requires us to completely let go of what was to be what is, or what is to be. And in the let going of what was, like if we think of transformation like a metamorphosis, like a caterpillar to a butterfly, like the butterfly can't go back and to being a caterpillar. It might be able to experience the same tree, but it will experience that tree very differently as a butterfly. And so the reason I share that is, even when you are letting go of something that wasn't serving you, a habit, a part of your identity, a relationship, you still have to grieve the loss of what was. And because the grieving is so hard for us, we often won't actually step into the transformation.
Mm.
So
Yeah, that's powerful. As a caterpillar who feels in the goo right now, the chrysalis, as Chip would say and did say actually on this podcast for everybody wondering right now if Justin and I met through Modern Elder Academy, like
We
many
did. We're
guests.
the
We
youngest,
did.
the young modern
Well,
elder boys.
one of us is actually the youngest modern elder, and the other one is 6 months older. But you will never be able to tell from
Nope,
this
nope,
video
nope,
which one's
nope,
which,
nope.
except for that you already said you were 35, and I think on last week's episode I said I was 34. So
Yeah,
you
so
know,
it's
we can
you.
put it together.
I had you
Uh,
beat for a little bit until you went, so it was okay. We're
exactly.
the two
Yeah,
youngest,
those
two
six
youngest, two
days
youngest.
you had me. So I ask everybody this, and I'm excited to ask you this. Um, if a child walked up to you, really not knowing what the word grief meant, like this is a new word, um, how would you explain it to them?
Mm. Grief happens and is something that when you love something so much and then it leaves you, it's the feeling that you have after that. It's the feeling that you have after loving something so much that then it leaves you.
Hmm, I love that.
Mhm.
I love it. I love asking that question.
You've reached Grief Club. Leave a message after the beep.
Hey, Grief Club, it's Addy. Yeah, I am back talking during the ad, which should be your well deserved break from listening to me talk, but we know sometimes that's not how it works. I just wanted to say if you are really enjoying this, if you are feeling connected, a little less isolated, and going, I only get this once a week, how can I stay connected throughout the rest of the week? The answer is social media. Now remember, when you're using social media, we want to use conscious consumption, and that's what I always promise at Share My Grief Club. I'll put it in the show notes. Anything that I don't create, I consciously curate, and it's all designed to help people on their way to honor their journey, and if all else fails, find the funny. We'll see you there. So, next up, we're going to dive in. So the launching point for this week's conversation is all about getting connected with our inner voice and reaching out for what we need. But also, I've gotten a lot of actual sort of grief club mail off this topic because people are saying, I don't know what my inner voice is and I don't know what I need. I don't know what to ask for others. I don't know how to support myself. I don't know, what to look for even spiritually. Like there's just so much there of I'm having trouble getting clear on what I need, so then I can't ask for it. And that grief fog certainly does not help, which anyone who's been in grief knows, that sort of fog comes in. So I wanted to just pick your brain on this really, but if you can talk a little bit about, the process of getting in touch maybe with your inner voice and knowing maybe what the difference is between inner voice and just thoughts.
Oh, this is really good. So let's talk about this concept of inner voice, right? Like we all have one, you know exactly what it is. And just to put that in a frame. So I'm going to put this frame together first. Don't make this hard. It's so easy that because it's so easy, we try to make it hard because we imagine that it's supposed to be some really challenging thing for us to hear our inner voice. And just from that context of being like, I have to really listen deeply and I have to really know, I'm trying to figure out how to find my inner voice. You're like literally missing the inner voice because it's actually something that's so natural and so easy and so simple to us. So, like, just to experience it right now in the simplest of ways, close your eyes and ask yourself this question. Are you hungry right now? And just answer it in your head. Are you hungry? If you could eat anything in the world right now, what would you eat? What would make you feel so good if you ate it right now? And what would make you feel really bad if you ate it right now? What would not be a good thing for you to eat right now? Okay, open your eyes. That's your inner voice. It's
Okay.
that fucking simple. Okay, like
Well, I just have to share, like, and I'm sure many people had this, but the contrast of the two, because I was like pizza, and then when you asked what would make me feel good, not pizza. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I pictured this like sort of Baja-esque, like healthy meal that would make me feel good, and like, and then it
Yeah.
was like, what would not make you feel good? And it's like the pizza with the ranch.
The pizza with the ranch.
But if we had stopped at what do you really want right now, I would have just said pizza. And I think that's where a lot of people are with this.
Yeah. And so that the reason I did this practice, and I'm going to take you further into this, is like the piece of saying, I don't know how to hear my inner voice. I want everybody to just drop that, right? Because you just did. That's your inner voice. It's with you all day. It's not some special abracadabra thing that you have to work your way into being worthy of hearing. Now, what we have to get worthy of hearing is what part and what intentions and what motivations are we listening to from our inner voice? Because our inner voice is going to give us all kinds of messages, just like the messages, what do you really want to eat? A milkshake. Well, what would make you feel really good if you ate it? A salad. Okay, what would make you feel really bad if you ate it? That milkshake. So, okay, these two things exist together, right? You want a milkshake, and you also know it's in your highest good to eat the salad. It doesn't mean that you never have the milkshake, maybe, but it also means that you have to know when to decide. And this is the key between the milkshake and the salad. When is it the moment to choose the milkshake, and when is it the moment to choose the salad? This is so, I'm making this basic on purpose. Okay. You know, I guess what I'll say is this, Addison, like when you tap into your own inner voice, what does it sound like to you?
Like, what does the voice sound like?
Sure.
Like,
However it comes up for you. Yeah.
It's weird that when you say that, when I really tap into mine, it doesn't have sound. It's like I don't know, knowing, omniscient, like, it's so weird that you say that. I guess I don't hear it, but I hear it. Like, yeah. Whereas the more critical voices have sound, they have tone.
Sound.
I know what the voice sounds like.
Yes. This is really good. And this is a part of getting to know your inner voice. So, and other people will have different answers. So if your inner voice has sound, that is fine, right? It doesn't mean that Addison's way of hearing his inner voice is the same as yours. Some people's inner voice, I'll just put it this way, is through images. So some people go, oh my God, I closed my eyes and all of a sudden I saw this. And it let me know that I was supposed to go here. That's your inner voice showing up as images. And so your inner world is this very rich, vibrant world. And what we have to understand, and I think this is the part that I want to explain here more deeply, is what part of that voice do we listen to? What part of that voice do we tap into? Because it's always there and you can always hear it. But when is it in the highest good for us to choose to listen to it or not? Would that be a helpful way to like approach this?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put this in two contexts. There's the part of your inner voice that is healthy to listen to, that is taking you forward towards your dreams, your goals, towards who you want to become, that is in alignment with the integrity of who you want to be in the world. There's that. Existing at the same time. It's not like another you. They're all you, right? Existing at the same time, in the same instance, overlapping, often competing, is a you that exists and is formed and colored by your trauma, your fears, your past experiences, your habits that you formed in response to all of those things. And differentiating between those two voices. This is the milkshake voice and the salad voice. You know, the pizza voice and the salad voice. Again, not that pizza or milkshakes are bad. I actually just had pizza yesterday. So it's, you know, each his own. Me too. And so, you know, but so for the sake of this metaphor, they're existing at the same time. And it's learning how to identify which voice to listen to and which one is speaking. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah,
I'm trying not to turn this into a monologue. But
my next question was going to be, because someone's asked me this before, and I did kind of say to a few people, hey, I'm going to have Justin, so like, what would you ask, kind of thing. And the question was, can my inner voice be wrong? Which I feel like you're tiptoeing right into, at least around figuring out which voice you're listening to.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So let's be very clear here. I want to really define the word wrong, right?
Mm.
So wrong. I think what most of us are saying is, am I going to make a choice that's going to lead me to pain or lead me to regret or lead me to sorrow? And what I will say, and what you know, Addison, and what everyone else knows, and it's one of the most cliche terms in the world, but you learn just as much, if not more, from those times that you go off track as you do when you're on track. And the reason why is in you making the quote unquote wrong choice. You get in the wrong relationship, you get into the wrong situation, you turn the wrong way. And in that turning the wrong way, you learn so much about what's right. You learn how to not make that choice again. You learn how to not listen to that voice again. So I just want to give everybody a little bit of freedom. I know it's hard because we're all perfectionists and we want to never make a mistake and we want to make sure we make the right choices all the time. But think about how much you have learned from the wrong choices that you've made in your life. Think about how much you've learned. Anybody who's been in a relationship and you look back and go, how the hell did I get in that relationship? Guess what? You're probably never going to be in one like that again because you've learned. And so I'm sharing that just to give us a little bit more flexibility to play, but to pay attention. And what I mean by that is make a choice. Most of us get stuck in indecision, and that indecision makes us get stuck in fear and anxiety and stress, and we're anxious and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Make a damn choice. And then when you make the choice, go, okay, my intuition is telling me to do this. I'm going to do it and I'm going to see what happens and I'm going to pay attention. And once I follow this up and see where this goes, what does that teach me about my intuition? I'm going to be very practical with y'all. I'm not going to put it on the screen because then you'll see too much of my private life, but I do have a notes app note on my phone that is called intuition. Look, intuition tracking. No, see, I can't show it to you without it telling. Well,
You didn't have to
intuition
show me. We believe you.
You see that? Intuition tracking. And I do it when I feel uncertain. So I said, okay, I'm deciding between these two things. Right now, I feel super stressed and anxious, but I feel like my inner voice is telling me to do this. So I'm going to do it and let me see what happens. And I actually go back and I write about how I was feeling, what the voice sounded like, where the anxiety felt like it was in my body. And based upon that choice being a quote unquote good choice or bad choice, then I know the next time I have this feeling, it's a no. It's not a yes, it's a no. So it's very practical the way that you actually track your inner voice. And then you base it upon the results of what happens when you're having that sensation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I'm so glad that you highlighted the idea that like action has to be taken from listening to the voice. I say this probably too much, but I know so many people who sort of live in the lecture of life university. Like they just go to lecture and they just take information. And I have been forced by my grief processes, which you and everybody who listens to the show knows all about, to live in the lab, where you have to experientially live and learn around this and learn how to live within loss. It's not something where I could study from a distance and then be able to regurgitate. It's something I had to actually live. And sometimes those things are very different until you take it into action and you take that, you know, what the inner voice is saying and then try it out, like you said. And so that second test of actually taking action, not just kind of becoming protective and judgmental from a distance, which I think, especially in grief, is like a trap. You know, to kind of think about everything, to read all these books, to listen to these podcasts, keep listening to both of our podcasts, but take what we're saying into the street, into the real life, and apply it all week long, because that's where it really lives. You know,
that's where you learn.
Where it's And I'm so glad that you said that, because it can get all just so heady. Like all of this stuff just like in your head. And especially when we're talking about literally an inner voice, it also is literally in your head. But you welcome and take that voice out into the real world and apply what it's saying. And like you're saying, like learn what you learn. And
learn.
You know, maybe you're quicker. I think, you know, I ended up in the same type of relationship a few times. You know, it takes a few times sometimes. And as you start to really develop that. So one thing I wanted to hit with you on this topic, because we're right there, is when you're grieving or when you're dealing with the loss of anything meaningful. And I always remind everyone on the show, this isn't always death-related loss. It can be the loss of an opportunity, the loss of a relationship. I'm in a place right now where for the first time in 14 years, I'm dealing with everyday type grief. I'm putting myself out there and not getting an opportunity. There's grief there. I'm putting myself out there romantically and it doesn't work out. There's grief there. That's like sort of all in there too. And both in the capital G griefs of losing brother, father, friend, and also in these grief process where people are noticing it is the same, process of healing, but people, I'm supported. It's not that I'm not supported, but people are asking even the thing I taught them to say when I was on like a pure mental health mission to save the men of what does support look like for you right now? When they ask that question, I don't know what to say. And I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with. They accept weird condolences or weird advice, but they don't know how to redirect based on what they truly want and need in the moment, in terms of support, in terms of what's possible. So how would you guide us to really be able to check in and be able to teach the people around us how to treat us, but also actually seek out the support we're looking for within ourselves,
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, Addison, because that question, like when you're in a grief state or in even a state of, a little depression or whatever it is that's coming up, and somebody asks you, what do you need? What do you want? Sometimes it's so hard to even know, like to have any clue of what to ask for, what to say, what to, in any context. And so there's a few things. So I want to talk about, there's two things that I want to share. I want to talk about the frame. The first frame is external support. And then I want to talk about internal support. And when I talk about internal support, well, I'll get there. So external support, all I can share with you is things that have worked for me and things that I've seen work for people that I've worked with, out in the world as it relates to this. So the first thing that has worked for me and I hear works for many people is just simply the idea and the fact of just not being alone. Just not being by yourself. When you're in that state, we often, our natural response is to kind of, I need to turn away from the world. I need to go be by myself. And what we actually know from all the science is that it's connection that brings us and lifts us out of these states. And so even if you don't go with somebody and talk about all of your pain and what it is that you're going through, even if you don't open up and be vulnerable, just being with someone, now not anyone, someone who you trust, who you can have a good time with, whatever, that is a powerful form of support in its simplest way. Now, if we're going to break that into a few more segments, one way of support, I know everybody doesn't have access to all these things, so I'm giving kind of like a buffet, but depending on who you can be with, one form of support that's really helpful to a lot of people is physical touch. And so physical touch could be a massage, but physical touch could actually be one of your really good friends. It doesn't even have to be romantic or sexual touch, but just saying, can you just come cuddle me? Like, can you just, I don't want anything sexual. I don't want this. I'm just feeling a little this. Can you just come cuddle me? Can we just come hug and touch and lay down on the couch and watch a movie and just hold? And we do this with you. We all know this because when a kid is crying and going through something, what's the first thing you do with them? You pick them up and grab them and hold them. And so this is all evolutionary. This is all science. It releases dopamine into our system and oxytocin and all this stuff that helps pull us into a different state. So physical, non-sexual touch. And if you're with somebody and you want it to become more intimate, you're welcome to do that, right? But these things are proven to really help. The second thing that I'll say around this that's not physical, but is also scientifically proven around support is opening up and sharing and being vulnerable. And so when you do this, though, I'll give people a couple little tips. Is this could be over a phone call, it could be over a FaceTime or a Zoom or in person. My suggestion is that you prime the conversation when you're going through grief or you're talking to someone by telling them what you need from them in the conversation. This is why I'm saying this. What happens to most of us, and we've all had this experience, is we open up and we get ready to share something, and maybe we start crying or something happens. And the person listening all of a sudden starts trying to be the therapist. They start trying to fix us. They start trying to make us not cry or give us advice. And if that's what you want, name it. But oftentimes I will call a friend and I'll say, look, is it okay if I just share something with you right now? I'm going through something, and all I want, I just prime it in, all I want is for you to listen to me and reflect back to me what you hear. I don't need any advice. I don't need you to make it better. And if I cry, I'm okay, because I actually really need to cry right now. So I'm okay. You don't have to fix it. Like, just let it come out. And that priming people with that gives them, they just can hold space. And if what you want is advice, then you say, hey, I'm going to share this with you. Afterwards, I really love some advice. So my clear takeaway from this is share vulnerably, but also ask for what you want on the other side, so the person can show up for you the way you want. Because what happens is, if we don't want advice, we're not ready for advice, and they start giving it, then we actually feel more closed off, and then we want to be alone again. So
I love that. And I want to pause there
go
and
ahead. Yeah,
say,
please. Yeah.
Take part one of this conversation right before you speak to whoever's the supporter, and figure out which voice is speaking when you're figuring out what you want and what you're going to ask for. Because I know firsthand there's like that other not inner voice that will try to say something that sort of keeps me safe or keeps me less vulnerable. When you were saying that about being held, like, there became this invisible rule around me in my 20s that people like to this day repeat, and I like just like never know how to unbuckle it. But Addison doesn't like to be touched. And it became this rule because I was constantly sort of front and center in these funeral like situations, and like everybody touching me and everybody hugging me, and it was like I could never get my composure. But that rule became very scary for me, and it became this thing where only the person I was with romantically was like able to touch me. But then there's all these years where I'm not with anyone romantically, and I do crave that. And it became such a struggle to go back to saying, like, actually I do want it, but I want it from you only, or from this friend who I trust, or whatever. Like, I went years just not saying anything about that, like just letting. And that's one of the things I worked with my coach and mentor, who's been on the podcast before, Jennifer Merrifield, about reteaching people how to treat me. When I come in the door the way they are, being like, oh, actually, I'd love to hug, like, and I have to actually like retreat, like, I do love to be hugged. So it's this thing where this other voice that was like, if someone hugs you right now, you will fall apart, was what I was listening to. And again, I was 23 and 20, and 19 when these bigger grief processes happened. So my brain wasn't even fully developed.
Right.
But like, so we weren't even thinking about an inner voice at this point. But like, I was in a weird way listening to this voice that I thought would protect me, but wasn't really what true support looked like for me. And when I realized that, there was a long time where I was afraid to ask. So I just wanted to like demystify that a little bit, and the clarity around those two things. And that exists, like you said, both exist at all times. My don't touch me and all I need right now is to be held, and I don't know how to ask for it, are constantly at contrast in my life, especially when my grief waves and swirls come back.
Yes. And you know what? You're bringing up a couple really important things. So one is one of the biggest misconceptions. Actually, let me frame it this way, because I'll frame it as that second part of inner support, and the number one tip that I actually have for people to hear an inner voice that will guide them forward. In a podcast, this is the best thing that I can give you in this format of how to hear an inner voice that is positive and help distinguish between the two. So the first thing that you do, first thing, before you even try to listen and tune into anything, is you close your eyes for a moment and imagine a future version of yourself. You tether yourself to a future that is beyond your circumstances. And so whatever it is that you're grieving, whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that it is, and it's hard for a second to get ourselves there sometimes, but you imagine yourself maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, it could be 5 years from now, happy, fulfilled, loved, present in whatever relationships. And this is like a fictional story. You're going to make up like a fictional movie of yourself in your head. Like you could rub a magic lamp, anything's possible. What do you notice? And once you gather that, you place yourself in your mind in that space. So you look around yourself and go, where am I at? What am I doing? And from that place, you ask that version of yourself, what would you advise me to do? What would you do in this situation? If I asked you, what do I need? What would you tell me? Because what happens is we're oftentimes creating our solutions built out of the problem that we're in. But we want to create our solutions from the place of the problem being solved. And that gives us two very different approaches to how we handle a situation. And so the way that you hear your inner voice, to put it in like 3 steps, go to the future self beyond your circumstances, where you're beyond the problem. Ask that wiser, older future you, whatever the question is, and let that then be the action that you take. It will always lead you in a better direction than basing it off of the present or the past.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Oh, I forgot something really important. Just one more thing about this. So this is big. This is what actually inspired me to share that. Is one of the things that people confuse. I will tell you, this is the number one piece of confusion about people hearing their inner voice. It's the biggest mistake. People assume that their inner voice or following their inner voice is going to feel right. It's the biggest thing. Following your inner voice oftentimes will feel like the wrong thing to do. And the reason why is because that inner voice is often trying to get you to do something out of your comfort zone, out of your patterns. And your pattern is what feels right. Your pattern and your whatever you've been spinning and doing is what's going, oh, that just feels like the right thing to do. Well, girl, the thing you've been feeling your way through the right thing to do has been leading you to this same person again and again and again. So like clearly we want to feel different. So if you go out of your comfort zone, it's going to feel a little wrong. It's going to feel a little scary. That's also another cue that you're on to something. It's not black and white, not every single time, right? But especially when you're in a space where should I be vulnerable or not? And you go, well, what feels right is for me to just wait. Well, of course, because being vulnerable is scary. So you're going to feel like it's the wrong thing. So anyway, hopefully that's a helpful way to distinguish.
So helpful. And I've got my inner voice, I've got my other voice, and I have a producer's voice. And I'm just going back to the producer's voice in my head. You were explaining externally asking, and then you said you wanted to get to internally. Do you feel that you covered with what you just said?
Yes. So the internal part is the internal piece, just to be clear, support is going to the future you that has already moved beyond this. That is the inner resource that we often need, is taking ourselves out of the problem and into a future where the problem doesn't exist. Because oftentimes 90% of the situation of whatever the problem is all inside. It's all of our perception about what is wrong. And so if you can get yourself to a different place and make your choices from there, you'll often dig yourself out of a ditch a little easier. So
perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to check because I cut you off with a question, and I know when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm like, wait, shut up. No, I need to know the other thing.
You're right. Yeah, that was the internal.
I figured that was the internal, and that works perfect. But yeah, no, this truly has been just such a living example of that intense feeling of living within your grief, but being able to be so grateful within it, and the support that that can truly surround you, and kind of stepping into it. And that can be uncomfortable. That feels like too much of a good thing around trying to talk about what would be a bad thing. And I'm using air quotes for good and bad, as I've done many times. But I so appreciate it, and I really do. My gift to myself and my gift to everybody is when we come on here and we talk about this stuff, we round it up with talking about where we find the funny in life. I'm curious, like, where do you find the funny? What is your...
Okay, this is going to sound really silly. and maybe unexpected for me, but people on the internet are so funny. I don't know how people think of this stuff. Like, I've been finding so much joy. I have this group thread with my family, and we send each other like Instagram reels that are just hilarious.
Mhm.
And it's the way that people frame things, like a video that wasn't even funny, but then a little caption on top of it. Like, I have for the last week or two been cracking up like hysterically. And I'm like, how things, and they do it so fast. Like something
Mhm.
happens in the real world, and within 5 minutes, somebody has made like something that is SNL worthy, in an Instagram reel. And I'm like, people are hilarious, way funnier than me. And I appreciate how instantly I can come across it.
I
So
do love that. And a little bit of points back to the internet and social media because it can get so hated on. But there are times when I would not be belly laughing. And
yeah,
also, what I love about those things is who I want to send it to next. It connects
yes,
me to the sense of humor of so many different people, depending on like exactly what it is. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I just like,
yeah,
as you were saying it, I just like lit up because there are times when everything is such a struggle. And I will say to my best friend, I'm like, but the internet is just being so good to me right now. Like, I
yes.
need this. Like Angela Bassett did the thing, like that whole era for like a week there, just like all of that. Like it's just like, thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for these
there's so
gifts,
much. The
you
internet is
know.
undefeated, undefeated. And, obviously there's a lot of negative that we can put into the internet, but there with anything, there's negative and positive. And I think that one of the positive things that I take out of the internet is how much it makes me laugh randomly in a 5-minute break in the middle of my day. I'm cracking up, and I just appreciate that so much. So,
I also this week was laughing because I was thinking because Jerry Springer died this week.
right.
And I like was sitting there and I was thinking, I was like, well, Jerry Springer was kind of like our TikTok. Like
Yeah.
that's the only way you had insight to
Oh,
like that type of like video or like America's Funniest Home Video didn't show like that, brand
yeah.
of like funny and weird that exists in the world.
Yeah.
Like so I was like, it was like very weird. And also I'll just share this, like completely caught off guard right before I got in, someone sent me this meme that that said there's good news and there's bad news. And then it's a picture of a headstone at the cemetery that says Waldo on it. And I just like, I love that. Like that's why I want to be in this world. Like just like
Yeah,
I got so that's
Waldo.
so my sense of humor. And so like
Yeah,
it's such a cool way to connect, when you're just like, oh,
I
okay,
agree.
that's good. Someone somewhere gets it. And they get that death can be funny. They get that like, all of this can be funny and you
I
can
agree. It's
that
what
way. And I love
connects us.
that.
And it's, with all the division and things that are being promoted to us in the world, these kind of things that can make us laugh together are so important. And I really appreciate those things at this time. So
Me
great
too.
question. I love that.
And I love our friendship is such a mix of that. We can go
Yeah.
there, it's like I always say you're like the mix of the spiritual and the science, but then also like the silly, like on a personal level, and
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
that's so important to me. And I say that to everybody, especially the people we meet through Baja, like it has to have that balance of I know you're a real person who can like have fun with this whole thing too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise it can be such a beast. Listen, people are going to be looking for you in all the places. So what are all the places? Where do we find you?
Yeah, let me tell people the best two ways to dive deeper into this work and to find something meaningful that will help them. So I have a lot of work out in the world if you search my name, Justin Michael Williams. But I think the best places that I'll direct you are number one, my book is called Stay Woke, a meditation guide for the rest of us. And my God, when I had that title come to me in 2018, if I only would have known how dramatic the word woke would be. But what the book is about is what Addison and I have been talking about, which is how you take these internal practices and apply them to your life in a very real, practical way. Into all kinds of things in our life. I have a practice in there about pornography. I have practice in there about people who are smoking weed. I have practiced like very real life applications to mindfulness, overthinking, perfectionism. And so it's on Audible. It's everywhere you can find it. The second option that is something I'm really excited to be able to offer to people is if you go to meditationforthepeople.com, that's meditationforthepeople.com. I recorded a free meditation album, 10-part meditation album. That's these short practices. They're like, some are 5 minutes, have like a 5-minute energy reset, a practice that helps you feel your feelings, a practice that helps you drop into your vision, a practice that helps you get shit done and take action. And it's totally free. It's on every streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, everywhere. But if you go to meditationforthepeople.com, you can easily get access to any of those platforms and all the meditations there. So yeah, and you put your email in there, and I can stay in touch with you as well. So those are the two best ways to get in touch.
Incredible. And that book is so cool. Also the way it's designed and just everything about it. So please pick it up. All right. As the music starts to play us off, I'm going to use one word to check out, and I'll let you have the last word. I am going to say giddy.
Giddy.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here today. Well, Grief Club, that's the show. If you enjoyed it, please let us know by liking and leaving a review. This will help as many people who may need what we're talking about find it the fastest. Remember to honor the journey, and when that gets tough, find the funny.